we are here at the Texas Good Guys Summit Racing Equipment Nationals, and we're here with our good friend and customer, Mike Dusold. Mike, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Great to be here, man. Cool to see you guys.
Yeah, it's great seeing you again, Mike. It's been a few years. You and I first met at Good Guys Columbus when, ironically, I saw you in the pits, and I said, oh, another first-gen Camaro guy. I got a pit next to him. And the car back then was super radical, but I would say with pretty much certainty, this is the most radical first-gen Camaro on the planet. So, Mike, tell us about the car. Tell us the evolution of it. It is an amazing car. And tell us about some of the things you've won, because you've kind of won everything with this car.
Yeah, we've been successful with it. It actually started out as my daily driver project because in high school I had a 67 Camaro, and I got nostalgia and wanted another one. And then I came out to a Good Guys event, and the autocross looked like a blast. So I'm like, yeah, daily driver will be cool, but I wanted to be able to autocross. And then me being competitive, it had to do well, and then I wanted to win, and then, well, autocross is cool, but let's do road course. And then that led into doing Ultimate Street Car competitions, and then once we kind of outgrew the Ultimate Street Car competitions, we decided to do the Pike's Peak Hill Climb and a bunch of other things, and now the car is basically a street legal race car.
That is awesome, Mike. So this really is almost in a way a parallel to one of the most famous first-gen Camaros, Big Red. Because Big Red started doing the Silver State Challenge, I believe, and then morphed into racing everywhere, all the time, everything, which is another absolutely awesome first-gen Camaro. Your car has been around a lot, and you've run this in a lot of series. If my memory's right, you've won Optima,
Yes.
You've won LS Fest, East and West, or just East?
I think we've won more LS Fest than anybody.
You've won a lot, Mike. It's an awesome car.
It's been great, and we have a phenomenal group of people that all help with the car. And what I think is my proudest thing about it is that we've attracted some just massive talent to the team.
So some of the specifics on the car, let's talk a little bit about power.
Okay.
When I first met you, I think this car back then made maybe 700, maybe?
So in autocross, we almost always ran it around 750 at the wheels. We just never turned it up more. It was capable of 1,000 for a really long time.
Okay.
But just due to the fact that you can't really put that down, anything under about 100 miles an hour, it just wasn't practical for most of the time.
Yeah.
So we ran it kind of lower power levels. Now that we've switched into racing it with the slicks, it'll handle a whole lot more power. So we run it in the 1,100 to 1,300 at the wheels range a lot, which is a ton for a car that does time attack and
no
hill
kidding.
climb. So
11 to 1,300 at the wheels. That's it, Mike.
yeah, it's we're taking it
That
easy.
is awesome.
And the cool part is that it'll do that same power level at 14,500 feet. So it has to have the capability of just massive amounts of mass flow. So fortunately, we've got hooked up with Garrett Advancing Motion, and their engineers have helped us a lot on what we need to be able to support power levels at that altitude and still not run the compressor or the turbo too hard and overspeed it. We went to a single Garrett 88 mil big body turbo that sits right here. Both banks feed into it with actual long tube headers. In the past, we've seen a lot of people run really short manifold volumes and really short runners because they're trying to keep the volume of the manifolds low to help with spool.
Okay.
We have found that actually hurts our torque performance down low, and that we get more area under the curve and better torque production out of a long tube manifold, even though it's a little bit more volume. You can see kind of on this side where it'll turn and go up. Okay. This is where both banks come together and turn up into this, which is the rocket. So the rocket is part of the anti-lag system. What the rocket allows us to do is run the turbocharger where it almost thinks it's a turbine or a jet engine. What we've done is created what's called a rocket anti-lag. It's actually based off of what ProDrive did on the Subaru rally cars in, I believe, the early 2000s. And it works phenomenally well because it takes jet engine combustor technology and puts it in the exhaust. So we actually, the blue wastegate here is our fresh air valve, and it actually mixes the air in the combustor so that cool oxygen heats up, swirls around, and then ignites in the combustor. And we can actually get where once we warm it up, we can have the turbo spooled to 10 pounds of boost at idle. Yeah, so we could have the car sitting on the starting line at the hill climb with 10 pounds of boost already.
And probably a flame coming out about.
Yeah, and it's got about 3 feet of flame, so this is for real.
Yeah, the
like,
danger
we put that
jump
on there because people kept trying to stand next to the car on the starting line at the hill climb, and we're like, you are not going to have pants on if you keep this up. You need to get out of the way. So the anti-lag is phenomenal for what we're doing with the hill climb, because when you're doing a hill climb, the ambient pressure decreases as you go up in altitude. That's what the problem is for the engine. So if you think about it, any car here at sea level in Texas is running at 14.5 pounds of pressure on top of the air charge that's coming into the engine. So basically, if you think about it, you're 14 pounds of boost absolute. If you go to the top of the mountain, we run at 8.
Wow.
So if that's why you see 50% power cut at that altitude, is because the ambient pressure, it's giving you half the amount of air.
Interesting.
So with the rocket, we're able to have 10 pounds of boost. We actually have 4 pounds of boost compared to how it would be here at 15,000 feet or 14,500 feet. So our car thinks it's actually got ambient pressure plus, even when it's at the top of the mountain. So that's why that is such a great thing to have when you're doing hill climb or you're working with high altitude.
Well, tell us about the engine combination. So what fuel do you run? How big's the bore? How big's the stroke? All that good stuff.
So it's a 427 LS7 with a dart block, and it's got aftermarket crank and rods and pistons, everything like that. It runs GM Performance Parts heads, the 6-bolt heads, that our buddy Brett at Land Speed created his own port design for this specific engine, because what we're trying to do is really maintain velocity and pressure differential across the cylinder with the boosted application. So a lot of normal LS7 heads will have a lot of intake port and not as much exhaust port, and we're kind of backwards. We actually run a little bit less intake port and a little bit more exhaust port, because we really need to feed the turbos, and we need to keep from stacking too much pressure in the cylinders. We need to be able to bleed that pressure out of the cylinder, because we do have a higher exhaust back pressure just because of the turbo system. And what we've run into problems with in the past is if you don't have enough exhaust flow on a turbo car, you'll run into blowing the head gaskets all the way down the side on the exhaust side. And what's actually happening is you're just double stacking the pressure. You're not able to bleed the pressure out on the exhaust side, and you just blow the head gaskets. So having more exhaust flow will allow you to have a cleaner charge, and it allows you to get some of that pressure out, and it lets the motor run better, and it doesn't blow head gaskets all the time.
Do you have to run anything weird in the valve train, Mike? Like specific valves, specific, like titanium or coated or anything like that?
Last year we were running stainless intake valves, and we were having issues with them, actually ripping the rocker stands out of the heads. So we went back to titanium valves and lightened up the valve train. That works a lot better now. We also run super alloy exhaust valves because we can run into exceptionally high EGTs. It's pretty common for this car to run at like 810C on the exhaust, which is 1600 degrees roughly. So it runs high EGTs when it's full on making power, but it's happy there. So we run it there, but we have to have the components that can handle it. On top of that, we've got the Sean's Custom Alloy billet intake. We've got the Holley valve covers, MSD coils. We actually run GM accessory drive parts now.
Really? No kidding.
We used to have this really exotic custom accessory drive that I made, and constantly ran into little bugs with it, just because we ran a reverse rotation alternator and everything. So when we redesigned the car, we switched it to just a CTSV style alternator, and it runs electric power steering, so all we really have is an alternator and a water pump. So accessory drive got really, really simple.
So Mike, what's next for the Camaro?
The Camaro is going to be obviously going back to the hill climb, because we have unfinished business there. We finished qualifying 6th overall this year, which we were really pleased with. There was absolutely the possibility for us to have been in the top 4. And next year, I'd love to see us crack that top 3 or 4.
And you're going up against,
think it's possible.
Factory back teams.
Absolutely.
That have amazing resources. It's awesome that you, your shop, your team are able to compete at that high of a level. That is amazing.
Thanks. It's really fun, and we want to push the technology of what's being incorporated into the vintage cars as far as it can be pushed. And by doing stuff like this and learning what we're learning, we've gained tons of knowledge in how important is suspension geometry, which suspension geometry is important, what things do we need to adjust and what things do we not need to adjust. And we're testing all of these components in very extreme conditions.
Yeah.
So we'll know what are the failure points, what works well, what doesn't work well, what can be better, and that's a lot of fun.
And a run up the mountain, if I remember right, it's over 6 minutes, closer to 7, is that right?
It's about low 9 minutes is
Low
what
9
we'll do it
minutes,
in.
okay.
The record in the Pikes Peak Open class is 9 minutes and 20 seconds currently.
Wow.
And we feel like the data shows we have pace to beat the record of our class. So
That's awesome.
so does Reese Millen, but neither one of us got the chance this year. So we're both going to go back and go head to head next year. And they've got a really radical Porsche factory race car that they've done a ton of horsepower upgrades and everything. It's an amazing car, and it's super fun to have a 67 Camaro going up against factory Porsche race cars and being competitive with really pro drivers, and it's super, super fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. Well, Mike, I can't thank you enough for bringing the car out to the Summit Racing Display this weekend. It's good catching up with you. It's always great seeing you.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I can't wait to stop by the shop next time and see all the mad science projects that you guys got going on.
You need to come by. There's lots of fun stuff.
I will.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you, Summit Racing fans. We'll see you soon.